Okay, I am Alicia, a grateful recovering sex and love addict. And so, in our discussion about steps 1 through 3, what I realized was that when I got here, I had no idea what the real problem was. And so, what we want to really look at is that it's far more vast than we can understand when we get here. And so, creating a solid foundation for our recovery is huge. And that part of the beginning of that is investing as much time in recovery as we invested in our disease. Like what I thought of it as was putting myself in a boot camp. Like I had a recovery bag. And in my recovery bag was my basic text, was all of the brochures that I had, was the book Drop the Rock, and a journal. And every single meeting I went to, I was taking notes in that journal so that I could have something to look back on to really look at what were the golden nuggets that I got at every meeting that could apply to me. And so as I did that, it showed how seriously I was taking my program. I love the concept that we come here and we can get relief, but relief isn't recovery. There's a lot of people who come here and they get relief. And what relief looks like is kind of like, oh, yeah, I got this. I'm doing great now. I really get it. I need to watch out for guys who come across as qualifiers and I'll be fine. So we come up with all these different things that, we think will be fine and that we can get around working the 12 steps. And I'm here to tell you, if you take step 1 and you can relate to being powerless over your sex and love addiction, then you'll definitely want to work all of the remaining steps because that's where you get the transformation. And so, what we're looking for is the transformation. We're not here looking about how to get the hot tips on dating. We're not looking here for strategies to get the guy or get the girl. We're looking for a complete psychic change. And I am here to tell you that is absolutely available to us all. There isn't anything that I feel the program and my higher power has done for me that it won't be done for you too. So the first thing that we need to do is, if you are able to, is to get a sponsor. And so you want to put in the chat in all of the different groups that you're in, that you're looking for a sponsor. And so just because you get a sponsor, you're not married to that sponsor. It's totally okay if if that sponsor relationship doesn't work for you and you choose to get a different sponsor. It's totally polite to just be able to say, hey, thank you so much for your time. I feel like I'm a better fit with somebody else. So that's how we're beginning to learn how to set boundaries and how to take care of our own needs. Frequently, we're not very good at that. We don't know how to set boundaries and we don't know how to take care of our own needs. So these are really big steps that we learn how to do this in the program. And so then you begin to set what we call bottom lines. And so bottom lines are the things that we want to avoid that help us to establish something called sobriety. Now, people hear the term sobriety and is like, okay, if I go to S.L.A.A, does that mean that I have to stop drinking? There's no correlation between our use of the word sobriety and not drinking. So S.L.A.A has nothing to do with drinking, but we use the same term, and it's an excellent term for us because I was drunk on my sex and love. I didn't have the clarity of thought. I had a fog around relationships and sexuality. So we choose the word sobriety, but we have to look at what is sobriety for each of us. And so each of us come to S.L.A.A with a different pattern. And that's the first thing that you get to do is like, look at what really got you here. What really got me here was falling head over heels in my quest for LAVA. And LAVA stands for love, attention, validation, and approval. So the core wounds that set me up to be a sex and love addict, at the bottom of those core wounds was the need for someone to fulfill the love, attention, validation, and approval or acceptance that I didn't get from my parents. I come from a very abusive home. So it was, physical abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, sexual abuse. Did I skip any? It was just pretty darn abusive. And so I was looking for somebody to fulfill all of the unmet needs that I had. And so when we get here, we just don't realize how big that vacancy is, and that eternal quest for somebody to fulfill all those needs doesn't exist. Do you know why it doesn't exist? Because people are human. They are always going to fail us in one way or another just because they're imperfect. Like we're imperfect. And so partners that we have are imperfect. And I didn't really get that. I kind of thought miraculously that there was somebody who was going to be the perfect person for me. And there's nobody that's the perfect person for any of us. So we get to look at what's the pattern that got us here and then set bottom lines around that. And so the first thing I knew I had to set was I can't fall hook, line, and sinker, head over heels over someone I don't even know. And I called that the he's the one, the he's the one syndrome. Like every guy was going to be the one. And I love it. I can always tell when somebody's totally in their love addiction because I lived in my love addiction. It's like, he's so amazing. I've never felt this way before. He's the love of my life. Anybody relate? I love your laughter. I can't say your name because we're being recorded. But we all know, and we can hear it. We can hear it when newcomers say, "Oh, I've never felt this way before. It's so incredible. He's so amazing." Or we do it, if you prefer the same sex, same thing. She's so incredible. She's so amazing. My grandmother and her grandmother went to school at the same place. The stuff I've heard is just unbelievable. Well, that doesn't mean you're a good match. So anyway, for me, that's my number one bottom line. And then it goes into, for me, is that I have no sex outside of a committed, monogamous, exclusive long-term relationship and a conversation. I don't assume somebody's committed, monogamous, long-term, and exclusive without saying, hey, I don't move as fast as maybe some women you've been with before. And I need to be in a committed, long-term, monogamous relationship with somebody before I'm sexual. So, so that I've communicated, like that's responsible, that's mature. And it's really, really powerful. So nothing comes unbuckled, unbelted, unzipped, unhooked, or unsnapped for 30 days and 10 dates or more. Now, this is, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking on behalf of S.L.A.A. as a whole. But the reason that I have chosen that bottom line is because we are so used to sexualizing ourselves. Like we don't like it when men sexualize us or when others sexualize us, but I sexualize myself because I wanted to be flirty and sexy and touchy and feely. And so I don't do that kind of stuff anymore because I want someone to get to know me as a human, as a woman, as a person. And I want to get to know a man as a human, as a man, as a person. Because once we start sexualizing each other, all of those hormones just get stirred up. Is anybody with me here? Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Good. Thank you. Head nods are all appreciated. Because we're not sitting in a room together to be able to yeah. So that whole thing is up to me to set the tone Like the program has helped me learn how to be an intentionally autonomous woman, a woman of dignity, integrity, and grace. And so those are my primary bottom lines. Now, beyond that, there's six kind of guys that I don't date. I don't date cheaters, liars, abusers, users, losers, and confusers. And in the coronavirus, I actually, oh, welcome, Berlin. I love it. Um, in the coronavirus, I actually found female friends became qualifiers. And so that's how I added the six people I avoid is the cheaters, the liars, abusers, users, losers, and confusers. And so the healthier we get in recovery, what happens is we're able to spot those first five really quickly. And then there's people who are confusers. So in my case, girlfriends became confusers. Like we're friends, but you don't return my calls. We're friends, but I don't need to go into all of that kind of stuff. But it became really clear that love needs to look like love, sound like love, and feel like love. The same thing with friendship. Friendship needs to look like love, sound like love, or friendship. It needs to look like friendship, sound like friendship, feel like friendship. And so my love addiction was all about making excuses and JRD, justification, rationalization, and denial for other people. Like I'll justify and rationalize. Oh, it's no big deal. Oh, it'll all turn around. Oh, after we get married, it'll be different. So I don't do any justification, rationalization, or denial of things that aren't acceptable. So, and so one more thing I want to talk about before we dive into the steps, and that is what is a qualifier? So a qualifier is, first of all, it can be our parents. I look at my mom as my original qualifier, but it's someone who brings out kind of the worst in us, creates the crazy for us. Now, I create my own crazy. I'm taking responsibility for that. I can create my own crazy any day of the week. But, there are people who are cheaters, liars, abusers, users, losers, and confusers. And they are always going to be. And so my flagship qualifier, that's who I call my second husband. There's only been two. I call him my flagship qualifier because the worst crazy. I never dated anyone who made me feel so ridiculously like the dirt on the floor past my parents. And so every person we date is not necessarily a qualifier. So in recovery, I've had 6 sober relationships. And I would only consider 2 of those men to be qualifiers. One was a periodic alcoholic, and that's really crazy making. And the other was a pathological covert narcissist. And that's really crazy making and dangerous. So, but the rest, we just weren't a long-term match. Nice people, there weren't any, crazy things that were going on. We just weren't going to be a long-term match. And so we want to look at qualifiers, and that's one of the top bottom lines is to go no contact. So we want to go no contact as soon as we can with people who fall into that category of crazy qualifiers. Now, people hear this no contact thing and they're like, well, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. I don't need to do that. Well, that's not really that important. We come up with all kinds of JRD, justification, rationalization, and denial. And so we have to step back and say, what kind of recovery do we want? I want the biggest bonus package of freedom. Is anybody in for the biggest bonus package of freedom you can get? Like, who wants just the little? Yeah, thank you for the head nods. Yes, thank you. Who wants the little package of freedom? I want the big bonus package of freedom. And to get that, we have to go no contact with the people who do the crazy making for us the most. And so, my flagship qualifier was my son's dad. I couldn't have no contact, but I could have as minimal contact as possible. I didn't have to engage in his crazy when he would do crazy stuff and say crazy shit. I didn't have to get involved in it. I didn't have to plug in. I could unplug. And so that's what we're doing. We're unplugging from as many of the crazy making people that we will eventually recognize as qualifiers. And we'll recognize them as qualifiers in varying ways. So once we have done those things, what will happen is you go into a massive state of withdrawal. I do just recognize that if you're in withdrawal, you're hurting today. And so my heart goes out to you, because when we go no contact, it is painful. It is ripping the Band-Aid off of something that we thought was giving us love, attention, validation, and approval. We thought it was giving us that, but it didn't. It turned on us. And so we have to be able to step away. And when we step away from all of our patterns, now I got sober on March the 20th, 2012. And there wasn't a term in most of our vocabularies at that time called lockdown. But I went into my own self-created lockdown because I was really aware that every time I'd go to Starbucks, I would intrigue. Now, what is intrigue? Intrigue is, a level of flirting. It's making eye contact. It's connecting. It's giving my phone number to guys that I don't necessarily really want to go out with, or, it's intriguing is getting involved with somebody that might not be in my best interest. So I put myself on lockdown and I had no contact with any man I didn't have to have contact with. And so that included even, friends. Like, I could use anyone to be my drug of choice. And, in my case, what I was told is that I was exactly like an alcoholic. My drug just had legs. Does everybody agree? My drug had legs. So anyway, that's why it was helpful for me to go into what I called lockdown. And it was, really abstaining from everything I got a hit off of. And, getting hits could be as easy as, standing in line at the Starbucks or at the grocery store. I kept my eyes down. I didn't need to smile at everybody and say hello. I'm extroverted, and I used that to just support my disease. So I had to learn how to do that differently. So what we're going to do now is that you understand what qualifiers are, you understand what bottom lines are, and top lines. So top lines are all the things that we do to actually take care of ourselves. Like, we didn't know how to legitimately take care of ourselves. So we're learning how to get legitimate love, attention, validation, and approval. Like, we're learning how to love and be tender and nurture ourselves. I cracked the whip on myself. It's like, go, 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 do, do, do. Burnout was a normal thing for me. I thought that's just what you did. And so learning how to nurture and step back and take care of myself and have spaciousness in my life. And I call that white space. Like, every day doesn't have to be filled with non-stop activity. Is that we can take a step back and learn how to love ourselves. And so that's what top lines are. Top lines are the things that are fun, that make us feel good, that help us to stay sober. And And ladies, we have to focus on the things that make our lives rich and enjoyable. Because if we're not doing those kinds of things, then we look to others to fulfill our own needs. And it's our job to fulfill those needs. Okay. Great question. So it's helpful when you have a sponsor who helps you work through these. And so you begin to recognize them as soon as you can, because I don't know about you, but I don't want to keep putting my hand on the hot flame. And that's what it's like when we're trying to engage in our bottom line behaviors. It's just pain, 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 and pain. So you want to do that. But also, what you're talking about now are accessory behaviors. Does everybody remember what accessory behaviors are? So, accessory behaviors are the things that support us in our disease. I have got the most amazing love song playlist, you guys. When I would get ready for a date, I would turn on my love song playlist and I would get in this euphoric state. And man, by the time he knocked on the door, I would be in such a mood. It was dangerous. So honestly, I don't listen to that playlist anymore. That's an accessory behavior. So your question was, are these just things that are around our sex and love addiction? So usually they are, but that was something that's kind of like a middle line. If you don't have a sponsor, see if you can find somebody that has a little bit more recovery, is further down the line, and they can help you to set your bottom lines. I think setting bottom lines and beginning the steps is just what we need to do to get into recovery as fast as possible. So I'm going to read a question in the chat. It says that my question with people to avoid is, I am some of those things. I don't want to be, but I am. So it's hard to want to exclude those people because I would be excluding myself. How can I cut these people out of my life when I have done some of these behaviors? I think that's a fabulous question. I mean, there's not a one of us in this room right now who don't relate to that. So what we're learning is we're learning how to transform our lives. So we're learning how to change. And that's the beauty of recovery, is that you're not always going to be those things. None of us are really going to be all those things. So right now, the further we can get away from the people who are still in that, most people do not want to change. Do we all understand that? If we weren't like completely at our wits' end with our sex and love addictions, none of us would be sitting here, you know? And so most people do not want to do the work to change. Okay. So, so how do you exclude these people? You make a list, like, who are the ones who bring out the crazy in you the fastest? Who are the ones that disturb your serenity? Like today, my sanity and my serenity are the most important things of me. I have a no drama life. A higher power is number one in my life. And so the people who like mess all that up, they don't get the privilege of being in my life. They don't get the honor of having my time, love, and attention. So it's slow. Right now, what I'm saying may be just like, well, I'm not there yet. And that's okay. Like, you can come to this program. I love one of the women on our meeting earlier today. She said it took her 5 years to get 1 year. So whatever it takes, you can come in with the level of commitment that you're ready to make, and then that you can build that. But the more commitment you're ready to make, the happier you're going to get, faster, and with greater freedom. Like, it's all about freedom to me. Okay, I'm going to read one more question. How do I stay friends with a friend who is active in their love addiction with someone else while I'm focusing on recovery? Like, haven't we all experienced that? Can I raise both hands? Yeah, that we all get that. And honestly, it's not easy. You won't enjoy their friendship as much. It's just a battle, and you just get to be really clear that there's some people that you just end up distancing yourself from, because that person, you can tell them about S.L.A.A, but they may not be ready to hear it. They've got their own bottom that they have to hit. And so that makes it really difficult to be friends with people who are in their active addiction. And so I have friends who are in their active addiction, and I have to really be careful what I share with them about my dating life. And, I have one friend who every guy that I'll tell her something about, she'll say, "Oh, he sounds amazing, Alicia. He's the one." So she does the "he's the one" thing on me. And the beauty is that I see it. I see right through it, and I'm very aware. And so the first three steps are creating this unshakable foundation for you. And so the first step is we admitted we were powerless over our sex and love addiction and that our lives had become unmanageable. So we admit it's voluntary. Like, we voluntarily admit. No one's here twisting your arm. None of us are going to twist your arm to make you believe you need us. Like, this is a program of attraction, not promotion. And so we admitted we were powerless over our sex and love addiction and that our lives were unmanageable. So in working this step, I love to suggest to the women that I sponsor that they take what we call the characteristics. And the characteristics are 12 things, and that you go through and you just write your paragraph on each of those 12 things and how your love addiction, sex and love addiction manifests itself, so that you can get an understanding. When I went to our website and I took the 40-question test, it gave me permission to never come back to these rooms again. Because when I took the 40-question test, I only said yes to 8 things. And of those 8 things, I only said hell yes to 5. But those 5 things are all around love addiction. Like, I'm really aware that love addiction is the strongest thing for me. And so in step 1, it was very helpful for me to really recognize, I admit I'm powerless over my sex and love addiction, and my life is unmanageable. My life was unmanageable because, and then you define how your life is unmanageable. Okay. I fall head over heels. I think someone is the one. So I go high, high, high on the euphoria. Anybody with me? Anybody go high, high, high on the euphoria, and then plummet when I don't get the text, or when I don't get the call, or when I have the date and I don't get a second date. That would be the plummet. And it was a crash and burn. And so I'm powerless over that part of my love addiction, and my life was unmanageable. So to define unmanageable, like, who wants to admit that their life is unmanageable? And so, I would want to be happy most days. Like, my desire would be to be able to be happy and to be able to be focused on my work. Well, it became unmanageable for me when I would take the high, high, high express, and then I'd be totally into romantic obsession. If you relate a lot to your love addiction, you want to get our pamphlet called Romantic Obsession. One of the meetings that I went to at first, we studied the S.L.A.A literature. And when the day came that we read the Romantic Obsession pamphlet, I was staggered, like jaw-droppingly staggered, because it was everything that I thought made me a great girlfriend or a great wife. It's all of this stuff that just is defining romantic obsession. So we admit we're powerless over, and then we define. So I was powerless over cyber stalking. I would look up people's Facebook pages and just try to get as much information, and I would go deep. Okay, so this person knows him, and oh, this person knows him, and oh, this person, oh my God, I would spend hours cyber stalking. And so I was powerless over that. I had to stop that. And that my life was unmanageable around that, because maybe I was only going to go 1 level deep And 10 levels deep later, with information that I never needed and that wasn't valuable to me at all, my time was wasted and there I sat. So we get to look at what we're powerless over and our life, what has made our life unmanageable. So I invite you to just open up your mic and we're just going to do this popcorn style. Just say what you're powerless over. Short, one sentence. I'm powerless over. So with one more thing, if someone hasn't fully taken step one, then we have to look at, let's say you're a sponsor and you're working with someone who doesn't really know if they're a sex and love addict. So what that feeling can be frequently is you're trying to twist someone's arm to help them see their sex and love addiction. And so if you're sponsoring somebody who can't see how they're powerless yet, that needs to have a limited period of time. And so, I'll sponsor somebody for 30 or 60 days who's still like, I'm not sure, I don't know. Yeah, but beyond that, what we have to say is, I really want to support you in, uncovering, is this for you or is it not? And so until you're able to take step one completely, I can't walk you through the steps. And step one is really the only step that we have to take perfectly. Like we really do have to see that we're powerless and our life is unmanageable. Otherwise, why would we do all of this work? It's a lot of work, but we do all this work for an amazing transformation, for the life that we get to have. So good. So now let's take step two. So we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So this is where we get to define our God. Now, did anybody get to a 12-step program with a negative God, with a God that you were supposed to fear, with a God that was judging you? Thank you. Lots of hands. Mean God, and it's like you get to redefine your God here, and you have to redefine your God. Because this isn't a program that, again, is about a strategy or a tip or a technique. This is a program that's about the transformation we all need can only come through our higher power. It's only available through our connection to our higher power in the form of our daily spiritual fitness. So we get to define that. And I love it when I hear people talk about, my higher power is like a grandma, all warm and cuddly and positive and happy and good, and wants everything positive for me. And so we get to define that, whatever it is. And for me, it's an energy that is all positive and all powerful and wants what's totally best for me. I don't relate to the continuous referencing of a higher power in a masculine way. I relate to it just as much as a goddess, as the male kind of reference as a god. And so, but we have to have a higher power that is all powerful. If the higher power that you have isn't all powerful, then you get to redesign and redefine that higher power. So that's part one. And then part two is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now, this is where I think part two of step two gets glossed over a lot. And I think it's one of the most powerful parts of all 12 of the steps. Like if we could get a grasp on what sanity looks like, that's what we want to define here. So if you look at what your pattern is, what's the opposite of that? What is the sanity? Like sanity would look like being able to feel that feeling of, oh my God, this man's incredible. Like he's the one. It would be able to feel that and go, oh, Alicia, It's okay. You don't know this person. Let's put one foot softly on the brake, one foot softly on the gas, and be able to get to know someone. It means I wouldn't be obsessed with everything they're doing, everything they're saying. I wouldn't be thinking about them more hours in the day than was appropriate for how well I know them. So that's sanity. And so each situation, what would sanity look like in this minute? What would sanity look like with this person? And so we define sanity, spend a lot of time on what sanity would look like. So feel free to open your mic and just say, what would sanity look like? What would sanity feel like? These are things that are, in some cases, like really basic human functions and needs, and we don't have them. When our sex and love addiction are totally at the wheel, we don't have basic functions. So what begins to happen, if when we've set our bottom lines and we're going to meetings, we're making phone calls, we're doing the reading, we're journaling, we're working the steps, is a fog begins to clear. And as that fog clears and you exit withdrawal, and if it gets better with 30, 60, 90 days, is that you see there's this magical clarity that comes so that you can see the crazy that you did. Now, that's first, second, and third step. So the third step is that we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. So when we turn our will and our life over to the care of this God, that's like, it feels really like vague. What do I just say? Do I say I turn my life over? Yes. The third step prayer is phenomenal. So it's one of the most powerful prayers. I urge everyone to memorize the third step prayer. And so when we're surrendering all that we're powerless over. So we're surrendering all these people that are qualifiers. We're surrendering our patterns. We're surrendering porn, or we're surrendering masturbation. We're surrendering all of these things over. And then part of that surrender is like, sometimes I'll just walk around my house with my hands open because it's a demonstration that I'm giving this to God. If I'm really in the obsession or really in the dysfunction of a situation, I just have to remember it's not mine, it's God's. I get to give it to my higher power. But it's important to have access to something that reminds me, just turn it over, give it over. I also like the concept of a God box. So I just moved. I've sold everything, given everything away, everything that doesn't fit in a suitcase, a large suitcase, a carry-on, and a computer bag. In that process, I found so many things. I found the contents of my first God box, you guys. And I put all kinds of things in that God box. So it's a physical demonstration. You write on there, that you're turning over your mom and your need to be enmeshed with her. You put that in the God box. You say, God, take this away from me. I'm turning this over to you now. And it was such a wonderful experience to see how many things. I mean, I stuffed that God box full of things that I was turning over. So we want to look at all the different ways that we can see we're giving something to our higher power. Now, the part of the manifestation of turning something over to our higher power and surrendering it, we demonstrate how we're working the program. Like to me, if I'm turning it over to God, I also, in that process, because I don't have a direct link, is I'm going to make phone calls. I'm going to reach out to others in this program, and I'm going to be able to hear how they're working recovery and share how I'm working recovery. I'm going to be able to get to meetings, like the more meetings that we can go to. And I believe in 90 meetings in 90 days, especially those first 90 days of our recovery. But to this day, I'll go to 2 meetings a week. And if I'm dating, it's likely that I'm going to go to 4 meetings a week. So we want to demonstrate what is it that shows we really are surrendered, and to me, how we work the program. If I say, I'm powerless, my life's unmanageable, I believe a higher power is going to restore me to sanity. Now I'm turning my will and my life over. And I go straight to that dating app that my sponsor said I'm not supposed to be on. That doesn't show I'm surrendered. Uh-oh. Was that a guilty look? I won't call any names. So what shows I'm surrendered is the meetings I get to, the phone calls I make, the writing I do, the step work I do, and the way that I'm living my life, the places I'm not going, the people I'm not calling, the things that I'm not doing matter just as much as the things that I am doing. So on any given day and multiple times during the day, I will admit I'm powerless over whatever is in front of me, and my life is unmanageable. And I believe that a power greater than myself is going to restore me to sanity. So, what sanity will look like is doing the next indicated step instead of sitting around obsessing, being able to say, I get to go on with my life instead of worrying about if somebody's going to text me or phone me. It has to do with reality. And I'm going to, what would sanity look like? Sanity looks like living and being happy without obsessing or having expectations that somebody's going to love me who really isn't showing they love me. And then I turn that all over to my higher power. So I don't think there's a magical answer to that except faith. Like, we have to have faith that however it's evolving is how it's supposed to be evolving. And I like to say the universe always has my back. Like, even though it feels like, I get to know that it's all in God's goodwill, it's all in God's good timing, and that there's something in that is a gift. And what I found that this situation was a gift was teaching me how to be more present than I'm possibly have ever been present in my life. Like, there's not a distraction. So there's just no magical way for it to feel good, and that's what we want. We're kind of like feel good addicts, and so sometimes there's just not a feel good in it. It's a discomfort. And so we just get to trust that our higher power knows what's best for us. And the most important thing is the acceptance prayer, and acceptance is the answer to all of my problems today. And so, part of what happens in sobriety is that we really recognize that when we're sober and we're not doing the things that damage us, like, that's part of what we're doing. We're hanging around people who don't damage us. We're trying to learn to build our self-worth and our self-esteem. We get here with this gaping wound, the God-sized hole that we hear a lot about, but we're looking for other people to fill that. And so when it comes to our parents, frequently we have to admit that some of our worst problems came at the hands of these individuals. And some of these individuals are well-meaning, and so even though they are well-intentioned, we have to look at that frequently they can be our own worst enemies. And so, ultimately, I had 20 plus years of predominantly no contact with my mom. And having no contact with her was the very best thing I could have ever done. I never would have been able to get freedom and have high self-esteem. I am incredibly confident. But if I'd hung around and tried to constantly get her approval, because she's very clear with her disapproval, like, the approval would never have come. It would have been a lifetime of disapproval. And you just can't raise your head above the water. It's like you're constantly being shoved back down and shoved back down and shoved back down. And so it's just not good for us to be around those people. So I think that we each get to look at what's the appropriate level of the relationship. One of the first therapists that I had that helped me confront my entire family on the sexual abuse I encountered told me, Alicia, find the crumbs from your family and my brothers and see what the crumbs are and if they're worth it. That was the deal. If they're worth it. And, I do have a relationship with one of my brothers. My father passed away many years ago. He was a delight. Possibly the only reason I am alive, because his love was unconditional, but it couldn't make up for the incredible damage that my mom and one of my brothers, who was a violent sexual abuser to me, did. So I got to make that decision. And so that's what each of us get to do, is like, what's the balance? How can we have, an amount of contact that can feel healthy? But most of all, how do we get to move on so that we can live happy, joyous, and free? Some people are determined to make sure we're as miserable as they are. And I know that was my mother. My mother would never have really been able to, support me in things that make me happy and give me that kind of freedom. I mean, I really am grateful to say that most days I feel like my sex and love addiction has completely been removed. But I know, just as sure as we're all sitting here together, my disease is out in the parking lot doing push-ups. I know that just the right blend of, someone who activates all of my sex and love addiction could show up at any given time. And I remember one of the first phone meetings that I was on 9 years ago, there was a woman who had 20 some odd years of sobriety in our program. And she talked about losing it. And the way that she talked about losing it was that the program she was working was not strong enough to overcome the temptation she felt when she went to a class reunion. And there was another man there that she'd had a crush on in high school. And he was married and she was married, and they ended up having an affair, and she lost her sobriety on that. And so the reason that I'm, touching on it from this vantage point is that none of us have anything more than a daily reprieve. And so I think you'll discover that it's not about the qualifier is not the reason we keep coming. Like there's not a qualifier in my life. And I'm going to keep coming here because of the freedom and the connection and the joy that I experience. I love one of the questions that's in the chat, and it is it possible that someone who was a qualifier becomes not a qualifier anymore? And so I think this is an important question, because how many of you recycled boyfriends? Did anyone like break up, get back together, break up, get back together? Yeah, it's crazy making. And so what we tend to do is like we stop that cycle. And so when we think about, does somebody who was a qualifier ever become not a qualifier? Well, that doesn't mean you should race back to date them or remarry them, something like that. So we have to be really careful about that. So here's what I think happens. Like, is it possible that someone who is a qualifier doesn't disturb our serenity the same way? Like my flagship qualifier, my second husband, because I'm away from that person and the little tiny bits of things that I still have to deal with him with our son does not affect me the way it used to at all. Like I'm so unplugged from that. Now, is he still a qualifier? You're like, hell yeah. And I think that very rarely does somebody not become a qualifier, but does it mean that they can still activate us the way they did at one time? Probably not. But it doesn't mean that we keep bringing these people back into our lives, because usually they fall into cheaters, liars, abusers, users, losers, or confusers. They usually fall into that category, and leopards don't usually change their spots. So another question says, some people in the program have cheated on their significant others and reconciled. Is that different than what you said about qualifiers falling into those categories? Yeah, one of the many beautiful things about recovery is that there are a lot of people who have been serial cheaters, and they have been able to reconcile their marriages. Now, that means that their partner wasn't a qualifier. You know, there are people who maybe their partner is a qualifier and they eventually recognize it. When you can't recognize that someone's a qualifier, then you could possibly do that. But no, there have been many marriages. It's so, so positive when people, are able to do that. So, love needs to look like love, sound like love, and feel like love. So we tend to attract the people in the past. We've attracted the people who were the cheaters, liars, abusers, users, losers, and confusers. And so if we're deciding if it's a healthy attraction or not, then we have to say, does this person benefit my life? Does it make me feel better about my life? Does this person make me feel good about who I am? Is this a comfortable, relationship? When we're first sober dating, there's really not any such thing as a comfortable relationship, because we're just out of sorts. We can't think that sober dating is easy at first, because we're asking ourselves to do everything different than we ever did. But healthy, when we set a boundary, does that person respect that boundary? When we're asked out and we say, I have a conflict with that time, and they're good with it. I was a single parent and dating. And when I would have a conflict with my son, I remember some people would get really upset about that. And that's just not going to work. That's not healthy for me. And so we look at, when somebody around sexuality, how does this person respond when they don't get their way? The last gentleman I dated, I really tested him around that. I thought he might be a sex and love addict or a sex addict. And I would have dinner with him, and I would say, okay, I'm going to go home now, to see how he would respond. And, in this case, he said, okay, talk to you tomorrow. And it was very positive. And it just was like, wow, I got the sense to experience that I can be liked as a woman, even though we had a sexual relationship, but I wasn't just liked because of my sexuality. So you look at, is this a healthy relationship or is it not? And so it's how much crazy is there? I also think about, if my niece, who I adore, if she was experiencing this, what would I want her to be in a relationship with this person? So in some cases, if any one of you in this room were experiencing this, would I want that for you? So those are kind of measuring sticks. But overall, is this bringing me joy? Is this bringing me happiness? Am I able to contribute? Like, what am I able to bring to the relationship? And is this a mutual thing? If it feels one-sided, we don't do one-sided. We don't invest any more than that person is investing. We have to forgive ourselves. The shame game is the worst. Like, we will keep beating ourselves up with shame forever. And so we have to give ourselves permission to put down the bat. Like self-forgiveness is we were all doing the very best we could with what we had at the time. And so with recovery, we have so many more opportunities to heal and to grow. And so it's really like I just give myself permission to forgive myself, like to let go of all of the self harming, to let go of the self judgment, and to be free. And I know that it's easier for me to say than for us to do, but it's a choice. Like it really comes down to the choice to let it go and to move on to bigger freedom. And today I can feel when I'm in a shame spiral. Like I can feel that I'm judging myself, or I'm feeling like I'm being judged so painfully. And that I get to step out of that. I don't have to sign up and sign on for the shame any longer. So we get to learn how to forgive ourselves. Some people choose to share that they're in S.L.A.A. right away. And I've been one that I don't choose to share that I'm in S.L.A.A. until I'm really clear that this is going to be a long term relationship. And so, part of the reason that I think we have to be careful is when you say to somebody, I'm a sex and love addict, like they're going to have one of a few reactions like, well, hot damn, yeah. This is going to be a cool girl to date. She's a sex addict. And, or, they could totally turn them off. Like, I'm not getting involved with this. So, I mean, we have to be really clear on, how we share that and who we're sharing it with and how we're able to really help them understand. So I really believe that's something that we all get to choose. There's nobody who gets to tell you when it's important for you to do that. Now, I'm also really grounded in my recovery. I'm not going to skip meetings. So I have told people before, when I was sober dating the first time, that every Sunday night I had a book study I went to. And that, if we were away for the weekend, then I would miss that book study. But if I was in town and, if there wasn't something that was really special, I was going to go to that book study. And on Saturday morning, I went to a meditation class. And that meditation class made such a tremendous difference to me that I was not going to miss that meditation class. So I didn't have to say I'm going to an S.L.A.A. meeting on Saturday morning and Sunday night, but those were my home groups for a long time. And so I just made sure, that some people believe that you tell somebody so that they know how important it is. And I just haven't ever felt that I needed to tell somebody how important my program was, because how I live my program shows how important it is. And so I think that's something that's very personal to decide. And I think that we have to be very clear on how we share that and why we're sharing it. And it has to be somebody that I believe earns the right to know something that personal about me. And I don't speak for S.L.A.A. as a whole by any means, and I don't speak for everyone. So I would encourage you to continue asking that question, is that everyone's going to have a different answer to that.